Welcome to Discovering with Dr. Deb. Our last season, we were discovering the Enneagram with Dr. Deb, and it was packed with a lot of information while also being a lot of fun to talk about and explore the Enneagram and why we do what we do. So go back and check out those episodes if you haven't seen them already. Here we are in season 2, and I'm going to be focusing on trauma and using EMDR therapy as a tool to help process trauma. My co-host for this season is psychologist Dr. Christie Sprowls from Austin, Texas. She has traveled all over the world to provide EMDR in humanitarian efforts, and she has also trained clinicians and providers in EMDR therapy. So get ready, let's dive right in and talk about trauma. Thanks for joining us for this episode, and today we're going to talk about faith. Faith and trauma, faith and EMDR. Do people of faith have trauma? I mean, really, it's something to ask. And then how do they process trauma? And do they process it differently than people that don't have a faith that they practice? And then also, how does that affect them using EMDR or just experiencing, everything that's going on. So you have done EMDR all over the world, so people of all different faiths.
Yes,
really.
Yes.
I have not. So I've only done it in the U.S. I think only with U.S. people. But I have noticed in doing EMDR with people of faith, first off, they experience trauma just like everybody else.
Yes.
Okay. I don't think that changes that. Sometimes, though, they do have trauma related to their faith, maybe a betrayal, and so that makes them question God, and then sometimes there's some guilt. So even in and of that, there's a lot of abuses, misuses of power that I think people of faith, and then they really struggle with it, because they may believe they were brought up not to question the church, and in their mind there's not a separation between church and God, so they feel like they're sinning by doing that. And so I think there's that element first off too. But other traumas that they may have experienced, my experience in working with them and doing EMDR to address traumas, when they just naturally seem to allow their faith to help them heal. It's part of that brain going where the brain needs to go. And when they are a person of faith, that naturally seems to be part of their processing. Has that been your experience with other cultures too?
It's been my experience across the board. It's very interesting.
Okay.
I kind of wouldn't mind sharing a couple of stories.
I'd love it.
Different types of faiths and places I've been. And I mean, I have been out in small areas in huts and dirt floors and that kind of thing. And so wildly different conceptions and religious beliefs. So I do like to talk about this because it's actually something I was thinking about writing about, which is what I discovered quite by accident by doing what I do. Is that almost everywhere I went, regardless of where I was, if it was in the Andes, if it was like in Guatemala, it was in San Francisco one time, that the different people have created an EMDR actually almost of their own, and it's generally led by the person of faith, like the curandero, or the witch doctor, or whatever it might be, which I find really fascinating.
Sure.
So literally, they would do like and the American Indians do like this, like they have shells on their legs, and it's. So it's bilateral stimulation.
Oh my God, I have never connected that.
I'm telling you, I was blown away. I was like, everywhere I look, I see that it's being used in their faith.
In their culture.
In their culture. Wow. In the way that it makes sense to them.
This is
and it produces healing.
Wow. We didn't even talk about this before we decided to talk about this. So this is like kind of mind-blowing for me.
It gets me
fascinating.
Goosebumps.
Yes.
And yes, I find that I have these phenomenal sessions where, again, regardless of the faith,
right,
because of where I've been in the world, right, I mean, these transformations of having Jesus come to them and comfort them, having, this epiphany because God was with me. You told me a story recently about that. That just, again, heated up my whole little hands thinking about it. I'll let you tell that story.
Yeah.
But I forgot my connection. I've been so angry with the Lord, and it just is transformative. And again, it doesn't matter.
Right.
What faith they have.
Right. It doesn't matter.
In terms of that transformation.
Exactly.
And I'll let you speak to what you've noticed about that. So I'll.
Yeah. So I have one client that I worked with and had some came into counseling for relationship issues. So it was like, okay, we're going to look at your relationships, right? Yes. You think, is there trauma or, and really didn't really draw that connection. And in the course of some sessions, realized there was some issues in his early childhood and his relationship with his mother. And as often is the case, they feel guilty for feeling that way. But after we can kind of get them to put that away, let's not focus on that. What happened? Let's talk about what happened, just to validate the experience for them. And he shared that he would sit on the back of the couch. He would be his knees on the couch, looking over the couch, peering out the window in the middle of the night because his mom would leave. If his dad was at work, his mom would leave and go out and do things. And he would hold the cell phones. This was a while back. It was a cordless phone, actually.
Okay.
Hold the cordless phone, watching for the headlights to come up the drive.
So sad.
But was fearful and afraid something's going to happen to me. I'm not safe. And just have this fear and anxiety until she would come home. So as we did EMDR over that, and I didn't mention his faith, and I knew what it was. He'd shared about it during other sessions and everything, but we identified the image. He was very, I could picture this living room setting from the description that he gave. And the negative cognition, I'm not safe, and I can't trust people. He couldn't really delineate between those two. So we did the bilateral stimulation, and about halfway through the first session, actually, he finally just took a deep breath when I asked what he was noticing, and he goes, I wasn't alone. God was with me.
Yes.
And then he said, I wasn't alone. I was never alone. And so I just asked him to notice that, and we started the bilateral stimulation again. And the next time he said, the Lord will never leave me.
Oh my gosh.
He will never leave me. He will never forsake me. I know that. And I said, okay, notice that. And we just kept going. And this is not me inserting any of my faith. This is him processing it with his faith.
That's right.
Right? And I could tell his breathing, his body language, his voice, it all changed. Now we were not there, and so we do bilateral stimulation until there's no language of change. We hadn't gone there. So I didn't ask how disturbed he was yet. I just said, okay, we've done a lot of great work today. So what we're going to do is, and I just described how after the session, your brain is still going to be processing this, and that's okay. And, notice what's going on. We'll talk about it next time. The next session, he was like, this doesn't bother me at all anymore.
Oh my.
Zero.
Oh my gosh.
Just came to peace with it, and it was really this faith element that really helped heal his brain and his spirit, when it came to that.
Yes.
And so that's just one, but that was one that really got me to thinking, how does faith interplay with EMDR?
I can't imagine that faith is not instrumental. And even if you don't have faith, EMDR works, right? If you don't have some sort of beliefs or belong to some church or whatever it is that in whatever country you belong to. But even if and I'm sort of twisting it just a tad, but even if you just have faith in your therapist, faith in EMDR, and I don't mean on a spiritual faith, right? I just mean having faith here. And one of the things that I tend to do and have done all along, and I keep this to myself, and so this I'm kind of outing myself a little bit here, but
I know. You're looking around. Is anybody gonna know? Nobody will know. We won't tell.
Well, because it's very private and it's what I do.
Sure.
But I pray for them while I'm doing EMDR, that it will help relieve their pain.
I do too.
Yeah. Do you? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Because I want them not to be suffering. And so even if I'm having faith and they don't, they're in the place where, and it happens a lot, right? People lose faith of whatever, you know. So anyway, that at least there's something in the room that is possible.
Well, and you even said faith in the therapist, and that's where building that therapeutic rapport is so important.
Yes.
And that's where EMDR is very relational, because you may be the first person they've ever felt safe with. And we may be the first person that they really actually trust.
Yes.
And we get that as counselors, like, I trust you. I know you're going to tell me that you're the most honest person I've ever known. And sometimes it's like, well, that's sad. You know, they haven't had that. But a lot of times, people haven't had that.
I know.
You know? And so creating that therapeutic rapport and having those first couple of sessions where you're just actively listening and being present and validating for them and giving them this safe place. Healing comes in safe places. And I always tell my students too at Liberty, I go, people get broken in relationships and they get healed in relationships.
Yes.
And that therapeutic relationship is not one to be taken lightly. Yeah. So whatever's happened, healing can happen in that relationship. And so we want to provide this, safe place for them to be able to do that. And then it's interesting though, I mean, I haven't read, I need to kind of look, I wondered, I'd love to kind of look for some studies.
Yes.
You know, about faith and trauma or faith in EMDR. Really more faith in EMDR. That's what I'm kind of interested in. But yeah, you're kind of validated. I've not thought about, like you said, the American Indians. Oh my gosh.
I know.
That makes so much sense.
Doesn't it?
Yeah.
And it's like, it's everywhere.
Right. And I know I have a colleague, and she takes a team from our university to Rwanda every year. And she's got some people she works closely with there. And, you know, they've been through a genocide and all of that kind of stuff. So I can't wait to kind of ask her, like, how that interplay is and what they might be doing that mirrors EMDR. I don't want to say mimics, but... you know, mirrors it in that kind of way. What kind of, you know, how do they, because there's been a lot of healing in that. I mean, there are people that, you know, live near their abusers and then they have learned to forgive. And so I'm curious. So, but you've been to all over the world, Africa, China. And so you've seen different faiths play in as they,
I have. And it's very helpful. But also just astounding, you know, to me that bilateral stimulation is a part of their own cultural, religious beliefs.
Now, have you noticed, like, doing it in some of those other countries that you're doing traditional bilateral stimulation as we would know it, right? Do they seem to integrate their faith into their they do. Okay.
They do.
Yeah.
And even like this is the beauty of EMDR also. I mean, one would think that maybe it wouldn't go everywhere, but look, I have them do what they do, like for healing, and do either whether that's the shells, doing that while I'm doing a different type of bilateral stimulation too, or set it up or kind of guide them through an EMDR session. Okay. So you can use what they naturally do. Okay. And I know this is sort of like, I mean, this is spiritual, but it's sort of a little off topic about faith and things. But boy, you get to be creative. Yeah. And you get to use what they're using for themselves. Yeah. You know, and that may be drumming, right? One of the ways that they have ceremonies.
Interesting. So this is not related to faith as much, but language. Like, you don't speak all of those languages. I know you speak some. But you don't like speak all. You've been everywhere.
I just tune in.
We just switched to the, I'm going to speak.
The Evo or Hausa.
Yeah.
Or,
Yeah.
Swahili, whatever it is. Well, so yes, I was brought up and I spoke several languages as a result. Some from living in the countries and some going to international schools.
Okay.
So French and whatever, Spanish, English, and those were the easy ones. But then tribal ones, and also learning by living in those countries.
Yeah.
But you are correct. I don't speak everything, and
I just was guessing, but yeah.
I don't. So you do it with interpreters, and this is a whole nother conversation.
Yes.
Because I like doing it with interpreters. Let me tell you what happens, and it's really kind of funny. There was a movie, probably somewhere around 2002. That was called Lost in Translation. And it's about a guy going over to Japan and having a translator. And the translator, and this is what happened when I was teaching in Japan, you say something and then they say something, but it's like 30 minutes long and you're going like,
did I say all of that?
yeah, you're wondering, what are they talking about? This is 30 minutes long, But it works beautifully because what it does for me, one is that I'm reaching people that I couldn't reach. Two is that I get to stop and be conscious about what I'm going to do next and how I want to do it. I'm watching them say it in their language. I'm watching the audience
how they're responding.
And so I really love working with an interpreter.
It kind of slows it down a little bit, doesn't it?
It slows it down. That's exactly what it does.
Yeah.
And it's nice because when you're training, you have basically an 8-hour or 9-hour job of just being right in front of everybody and being conscious, and speaking.
Yeah, and being real present.
Yeah, extra special present, and then also holding the crowd.
Yeah.
So there's a lot that's going on. But it was. I like it. I love it actually. And there's a story that I tell, if I may. I don't know.
Yeah, we have time.
Okay. So this is just an example of being flexible also with culture. And I had a colonel in the army in Bangladesh that I was working with, training, right, EMDR. And it was very kind of fascinating, but he couldn't do a safe, calm place, right? We use that as sort of a screen to see, can they do this or not? It's just information. It doesn't mean they can't do EMDR. But what I did was bent the rules a little bit. This was all through a translator,
Okay.
And he couldn't get a safe, calm place or state, and so I said, is there a time when you feel happy? Or a time when you feel, full? Either that full of love or full in a positive way.
Yeah.
And he said, yes, it's when I'm watching my children play.
Okay.
So that became his, safe, calm play.
Sure.
And he could enjoy that because he's a colonel in the Army. There's not really a lot of safe places for him.
There's not a lot of downtime. There's no downtime. They're always on.
Exactly.
Sure.
And so, anyway, from that experience, it was lovely. We were able to modify the approach, which is this is something that's legal in the EMDR world, to modify it according to where you are and what you're doing and who you're working with.
Right.
What their beliefs are.
Right.
Regardless of your own. Right. And I mean, it's just transformational to me, seeing all of that. But from that, he brought EMDR into the Army over there. So they started having EMDR treatments.
Wow.
For those who were, and then we did it for the psychologists and the psychiatrists in Bangladesh too.
That's huge.
And those two groups wouldn't talk. They never had anything to do with each other, but it joined them. And so they continued to do things together after we had left.
Yeah.
Anyway, and that's faith, culture, so much. But
all of that, right.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, that will wrap us up.
Okay.
So today we kind of covered, like you said, faith and culture and using EMDR and just being sensitive to where your client is at.
Yes.
And aware and really curious. And let them teach you. Because I learned a lot. They have, some of their own mechanisms that may work. And so just kind of being just privy to that, curious to that, open to that.
Yes.
Humble.
Yes.
Humble, good traits. So, hope you learned something new, just like I did. We'll see you next time. Thank you. If this content has been helpful to you, I'd appreciate it if you would please rate the podcast, post it, and share it on social media. And also post a review. If you'd like to get in contact with me, my phone is 479-561-7600. or email Dr. Deborah at anchoredhopecounseling.net or Dr. Deborah at drdebfordoctors.com. Our website at www.anchoredhopecounseling.net has some useful information, and you can also reach out to me through the website. Remember, you are enough just the way you are, and you are loved.